Hello everyone, welcome back to Whisper Tales channel. Tonight I'm bringing you a story about places in Canada that have been erased from every map. What happens inside them, you won't forget. If you enjoy this story, be sure to like and subscribe. Alright, let's get into it. British Columbia's coastline stretches for over 25,000 kilometers. Within that vast expanse of water and stone lies something that has haunted the people of this region for generations. What you're about to hear has been pieced together from declassified documents, recorded testimonies, and interviews conducted over a period of 18 months. Some names have been changed at the request of surviving family members. Others insisted their real names be used so that what happened to them would never be forgotten or dismissed as fiction. This is the story of what emerged from the waters of British Columbia in the autumn of 1987, and what continues to emerge to this day. The fishing vessel Stellan's Promise departed from the small community of Kinnaird Cove on September 14, 1987. The boat was captained by Prosper Wainwright, a 47-year-old commercial fisherman who had worked these waters since the age of 14. His crew consisted of 3 men: Cormac Dunphy, the deck boss; Aldous Pennywhistle, a recent hire from the mainland; and Thaddeus Merriweather, who had crewed with Prosper for over a decade. The weather that morning was unremarkable: light fog, calm seas, the kind of conditions that made experienced fishermen nervous because they seemed too perfect. Prosper's wife, Ottilie, would later tell investigators that her husband had seemed distracted in the weeks leading up to the voyage. He had been sleeping poorly. She would wake in the middle of the night to find him standing at the window, staring out toward the water. When she asked what was wrong, he told her he had been hearing something. A sound. Like singing, but not quite singing. Like voices underwater trying to form words that human throats were never designed to speak. She attributed it to exhaustion. The fishing season had been brutal, but she noticed something else. Prosper had started making drawings, rough sketches on the backs of receipts and in the margins of the newspaper. The same image over and over. A shape that looked almost like a hand, but with too many fingers. The fingers curved inward, as if beckoning. On the morning of September 14th, Prosper kissed his wife goodbye and told her something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. He said, "If I don't come back, don't let them tell you it was an accident. Some things out there want us to find them." The Stellan's Promise was scheduled to return on September 19th. It never did. The search began on September 21st after Ottilie Wainwright contacted the Coast Guard. For 6 days, vessels and aircraft combed the waters between Kinnaird Cove and the fishing grounds near Desolation Sound. They found nothing. Not a scrap of debris, not a life jacket, not an oil slick. The boat and its 4 crew members had simply vanished. Then, on September 27th, a recreational boater named Millicent Ravencroft discovered Aldous Pennywhistle floating in the water approximately 40 kilometers south of where the Stellan's Promise should have been fishing. Aldous was alive. The medical report from Kinnaird General Hospital documented injuries that the attending physician, Dr. Florian Kettlewell, described as inconsistent with any known cause. Aldous had sustained severe lacerations across his chest and abdomen in a pattern that resembled writing. Not any language that Dr. Kettlewell recognized, but clearly intentional marks. Someone or something had carved symbols into Aldous Pennywhistle's flesh. His eyes had changed color. Before the voyage, his eyes had been brown. When he was pulled from the water, they were a pale, milky gray. Medical tests revealed no infection, no injury to the eyes themselves. The pigmentation had simply altered. Most disturbing was his mental state. Aldous was conscious when found, but he would not or could not speak in sentences that made sense. He repeated a single phrase over and over for the first 72 hours of his hospitalization. It showed us the bottom. It showed us the bottom. It showed us the bottom. The RCMP opened an investigation. Detective Gideon Blackmore was assigned to the case. His initial report, dated October 3, 1987, has since been partially declassified. In it, he notes his frustration with the lack of physical evidence and his growing concern about Aldous Pennywhistle's testimony. By the 5th day of hospitalization, Aldous had begun to speak more coherently. What he described would form the foundation of an investigation that would eventually involve multiple government agencies and result in the classification of several documents that remain sealed to this day. According to Aldous, the Stellan's promise had reached its fishing grounds without incident on the morning of September 15th. The crew began their work. Around midday, Cormac Dunphy noticed something in the water approximately 200 meters off the starboard bow. A disturbance on the surface, like something large was rising from below. Prosper Wainwright ordered the crew to secure their equipment. He had seen whales surface before. He knew how dangerous a breaching whale could be to a small fishing vessel. But as they watched, they realized that what was rising was not a whale. Aldous described it as a shape. Not an animal, not a machine. A shape. Geometric, angular, something that should not exist in the organic world of the ocean. It was dark, but not black. It was the absence of light itself. Looking at it, Aldous said, was like looking at a hole in the world. The shape did not fully surface. It hung just below the waterline, visible through the gray-green water. And then it began to emit a sound. This is where Aldous's testimony becomes difficult to transcribe, because he struggled to describe the sound in terms that made sense. He said it was not loud, but it was everywhere. It did not enter through his ears. It entered through his bones. It was a frequency that his body recognized even though his mind did not. He said the sound contained information. Not words, but something older than words. Images began to form in his mind. He saw the bottom of the ocean, not as a distant abstraction, but as if he were there, standing on the seafloor in the crushing darkness. He saw things moving in that darkness, things that had been waiting. Cormac Dunphy was the first to respond to the sound. He walked to the railing of the boat and climbed over. He did not jump. He did not fall. He simply stepped off the boat and sank beneath the surface without struggling, without even attempting to swim. His face, Aldous said, was peaceful. He was smiling. Prosper Wainwright tried to stop him, but was too late. Then Thaddeus Merriweather began walking toward the railing. Prosper grabbed him, tried to hold him back. But Thaddeus was strong, stronger than he should have been, and he broke free. He, too, climbed the railing and stepped into the water. Prosper turned to Aldous and said something that Aldous could barely hear over the sound that was filling his skull. He said, "Don't let it show you. Close your eyes. Don't let it show you." Then Prosper Wainwright walked to the railing and stepped off the boat. Aldous was alone on the Stellan's promise. The shape was still there, beneath the water. The sound was still filling the air, and Aldous could feel himself being pulled toward the railing. Not physically. Something was pulling at his mind, at his will, unraveling his resistance like thread from a spool. He said he fought it. He does not know how. He does not know why he was able to resist when the others could not. He fell to the deck and pressed his hands over his ears and screamed, trying to drown out the sound with his own voice. At some point, he lost consciousness. When he woke, he was in the water. The boat was gone. The shape was gone. He was floating in the open ocean with no land in sight. He was found 12 days later, 40 kilometers from where the boat should have been, with no memory of those intervening days and symbols carved into his flesh that he does not remember receiving. Detective Gideon Blackmore interviewed Aldous Pennywhistle 17 times over the following 3 months. Each interview revealed new details, or perhaps the details were always there, and Aldous was only able to access them gradually as his mind attempted to process what had happened. In his November 12th interview, Aldous described the symbols carved into his chest. He said they were a map. Not a map of the ocean's surface, but a map of what lies beneath. He said the shape had given him this map as a gift, or perhaps as a curse. He said the shape wanted to be found. It wanted people to know where it was. It wanted people to come to it. When Gideon asked why, Aldous said something that the detective noted in his report as profoundly disturbing in its implications. Aldous said, "It's lonely down there. It's been lonely for so long. It just wants company." The case of the Stellan's Promise was officially closed on January 15th, 1988. The official finding was that the vessel had been lost at sea due to unknown causes. The 3 crew members who were never recovered were declared dead. Aldous Pennywhistle was released from hospital in December 1987, though Dr. Kettlewell noted in his discharge summary that the patient remained fundamentally altered by his experience. Aldous moved away from Kinnaird Cove. He relocated to the interior of British Columbia, as far from the ocean as he could get. He never worked on the water again. He died in 2003 at the age of 51. The cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest, but those who knew him said he had been deteriorating for years. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating properly. He spent his final years drawing the same image over and over. A hand with too many fingers, beckoning from the deep. The story of the Stellan's Promise might have remained an isolated incident, a tragic mystery of the sort that maritime communities accept as part of life on the water. But it was not isolated. It was only the beginning. In March of 1991, a research vessel operated by the University of British Columbia's Oceanography Department was conducting sonar mapping of the seafloor approximately 60 kilometers northwest of Vancouver Island. The vessel, named the Temperance, was crewed by 7 researchers and 3 support staff. The lead researcher was Dr. Ottilie Marchmont, a marine geologist who had been studying the underwater terrain of British Columbia's coast for over 15 years. The purpose of the expedition was to map a previously unsurveyed section of the continental shelf. The work was routine. Dr. Marchmont had conducted dozens of similar surveys without incident. On March 7, 1991, the Temperance's sonar detected an anomaly on the seafloor at a depth of approximately 1,800 meters. Dr. Marchmont initially assumed it was a geological formation, perhaps an underwater ridge or volcanic feature. But as the sonar data was processed, the team realized that the anomaly was not natural. The shape on the seafloor was geometric, symmetrical. It measured approximately 400 meters in length and 200 meters in width. It appeared to be composed of a material that reflected sonar in an unusual pattern, creating interference that made precise imaging difficult. Dr. Marchmont ordered additional passes over the anomaly. The sonar data was recorded and analyzed. What emerged from that analysis would eventually be classified by the Canadian government, but portions of Dr. Marchmont's personal journal were preserved by her family and have since been made available to researchers. In her journal entry for March 7th, she wrote, "We have found something that should not be there. The geometry is too precise. The angles are too deliberate. This is not a natural formation. This is construction. Someone or something built this, and they built it at a depth that should be inaccessible to any known technology." The following day, the research team voted to lower a remote camera to the anomaly. The vote was not unanimous. One of the researchers, A man named Barnabas Whitmore argued against it. He said he had a feeling, an instinct, that they should not look any closer. His colleagues dismissed his concerns as superstition. The camera was lowered on March 9th. It took nearly 2 hours for the device to reach the appropriate depth. The video feed was transmitted to monitors aboard the Temperance, where the entire team gathered to watch. What they saw in those first moments was darkness. The lights on the camera illuminated only a small sphere of water, filled with marine snow, the endless drift of organic particles that falls through the ocean depths like an underwater blizzard. Then the bottom came into view. The seafloor in that region should have been sediment. Fine particles accumulated over millions of years. Instead, the camera revealed a surface that was smooth and dark, almost like glass. The camera moved across this surface for several minutes, revealing no features, no variation. Just that impossible smoothness extending in every direction. Then the camera reached the edge. Dr. Marchmont's journal describes what happened next. The smooth surface ended abruptly, dropping away into what appeared to be a shaft or opening of some kind. The camera lights could not penetrate the darkness within. We maneuvered the camera to look down into the opening, and that is when the feed began to distort. The video footage from this moment has been analyzed extensively. The distortion appears to begin at the edges of the frame, a visual static that slowly spreads inward. Some researchers who have studied the footage believe the distortion is equipment malfunction caused by extreme pressure or electromagnetic interference. Others believe the camera recorded something that the video medium simply could not process. What is certain is that in the final 30 seconds of usable footage, something appears in the darkness of the shaft. It is difficult to describe because it seems to change shape from frame to frame. One moment, it appears to be a mass of tendrils. The next moment, it appears to be a face. The next moment, it appears to be something that has no analog in the natural world. The audio recorded by the camera's microphone is equally disturbing. The deep ocean is not silent. There are sounds of geological activity, of marine life, of pressure and current. But the sound that emanates from the shaft is different. It is a low-frequency hum that rises and falls in a pattern that some acoustic analysts have described as rhythmic, almost like breathing, almost like speech. The camera feed was lost at 14:47 on March 9th, 1991. The cable was retrieved, but the camera itself was gone, severed from the line at a point approximately 3 meters from the end. The cut was clean, as if made by a blade. Dr. Marchmont made the decision to end the expedition and return to port. But the return voyage did not go as planned. On the night of March 10th, 3 members of the crew reported hearing the sound. They described it the same way Aldous Pennywhistle had 4 years earlier, a frequency that did not enter through the ears but through the bones, a sound that contained images, information, a calling. Barnabas Whitmore was found standing at the stern of the vessel at 3:17 a.m., preparing to climb over the railing. He was restrained by 2 of his colleagues and confined to his quarters for the remainder of the voyage. He would later report that he had felt compelled to enter the water. He said something was waiting for him below, something that had seen him through the camera, and now it knew his face. The Temperance returned to port on March 12th. Dr. Marchmont submitted her findings to the university administration, who forwarded them to the Canadian Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Within 2 weeks, Dr. Marchmont was contacted by representatives of an agency she had never heard of. They confiscated her research data, her sonar recordings, and the remaining video footage. She was required to sign a non-disclosure agreement that prohibited her from discussing the expedition publicly. She kept her journal hidden. She continued her work in other areas, but she never returned to that section of the ocean, and she never fully recovered from what she had seen. In her final journal entry, dated June 1991, she wrote, "I have spent my career studying the ocean floor. I thought I understood what was down there: geology, sediment, the slow processes of planetary change. But I was wrong. There are things beneath the water that do not belong to our world. They were here before us, and they will be here long after we are gone. And now they know we are looking for them." Dr. Ottilie Marchmont died in 2008. Her family reports that in her final years, she refused to live anywhere near the coast. She settled in the Okanagan, surrounded by orchards and mountains, as far from deep water as she could manage. But even there, she claimed to hear it sometimes, that sound, that calling from the deep. Barnabas Whitmore fared worse. After the expedition, he became obsessed with understanding what he had experienced. He spent years researching similar incidents, compiling reports of disappearances and strange encounters along the British Columbia coast. His research was never published, but his notes were preserved by his daughter, Clementine Whitmore, who has agreed to share portions of them for this account. In his notes, Barnabas documented over 40 incidents between 1950 and 2000 that he believed were connected to the anomaly discovered by the Temperance. Fishing boats that vanished without trace, swimmers who walked into the ocean and never returned, divers who surfaced changed, with memories of depths they could not have reached and visions they could not explain. He called it the sounding deep. He believed it was not a single entity but a presence, something vast and distributed throughout the waters of the British Columbia coast. He believed it was ancient. He believed it was conscious. And he believed it was calling to humanity, trying to communicate something that human minds were not equipped to receive. Barnabas Whitmore disappeared on November 3rd, 1999. He had rented a small boat from a marina in Campbell River. He told the marina owner he was going fishing. His boat was found 3 days later, drifting empty, approximately 20 kilometers offshore. His body was never recovered. His daughter believes he went looking for it. That after years of research, years of nightmares, years of hearing that sound at the edge of sleep, he finally answered the call. The most recent incident in this chronicle occurred in 2019. It involved a commercial diving operation contracted by a telecommunications company to survey potential routes for an undersea cable along the British Columbia coast. The dive team was led by a woman named Rosalind Dewberry, a veteran of deep-sea operations with over 20 years of experience. The survey was being conducted near an area called Mortimer's Passage, a stretch of water between Vancouver Island and the mainland, known for its strong currents and challenging diving conditions. On July 17, 2019, Rosalind and 2 other divers descended to a depth of 90 meters to assess the seafloor terrain. What follows is a transcript of the audio recorded by Rosalind's diving equipment during the descent. The other 2 divers were Silas Crowfoot and Evangeline Stonecroft. At 10:42 a.m., the team reached the target depth. Rosalind reported normal conditions. Visibility was approximately 15 meters. The seafloor was rocky, covered in marine growth consistent with the region. At 10:47 a.m., Silas reported observing something unusual. His exact words were, "There's a crack here, a big one. Goes down further than I can see." Rosalind instructed the team to investigate. The crack, or fissure, appeared to extend deep into the seafloor. Silas estimated it was approximately 4 meters wide at the surface and appeared to narrow as it descended. At 10:51 a.m., Evangeline reported hearing something. She described it as a vibration, a hum that she could feel in her chest. Rosalind did not report hearing anything at this time. At 10:54 a.m., Silas began descending into the fissure without authorization. Rosalind ordered him to stop, to return to the primary dive site. He did not respond to her communications. She followed him into the fissure. The audio recording for the next 6 minutes is fragmented. Equipment malfunction was cited in the official report, but those who have analyzed the audio believe some portions were deliberately removed before the recording was released. What remains is this. At approximately 10:58 a.m., Rosalind can be heard breathing rapidly. Her voice is strained, frightened. She says, "It's here. Oh God, it's here. It's been waiting." At 10:59 a.m., Silas Crowfoot can be heard laughing. Not a laugh of joy or amusement, but a sound that those who have heard the recording describe as hollow and mechanical. As if something was using Silas's voice to produce a simulation of human laughter without understanding what laughter means. At 11 a.m., Evangeline Stonecroft's voice enters the recording. She is calm. Too calm. She says, "Don't fight it, Roz. It just wants to show us. It just wants us to understand." At 11:01 a.m., there is a sound that audio analysts have been unable to identify. It is low frequency, at the edge of human hearing. It rises and falls in a pattern that some have described as resembling a heartbeat. Others have described it as resembling speech. At 11:02 a.m., the audio recording ends. Rosalind Dewberry was recovered from the water at 11:47 a.m. by the surface support team. She was unconscious and had to be decompressed before being transported to a hospital in Campbell River. She survived, but her account of what happened in the fissure has been contradictory and fragmented. In her initial statements to investigators, she said she saw something in the darkness below. A structure. Walls that were not stone, not metal, something else. She said she saw Silas and Evangeline descending toward a light source that should not have existed at that depth. She said she tried to follow them, to pull them back, but something prevented her. A pressure, a force, a presence that held her in place while her colleagues disappeared into the light. Silas Crowfoot and Evangeline Stonecroft were never recovered. Their diving equipment was found on the seafloor near the fissure, neatly arranged as if placed there deliberately. Their bodies were never found. The official report concluded that the two divers had experienced nitrogen narcosis, a condition caused by breathing compressed gas at depth that can cause hallucinations and impaired judgment. The report concluded that they had swum beyond the safe operational range of their equipment and had drowned. Rosalind Dewberry disputed this conclusion. She submitted a formal complaint to the Diving Safety Board, arguing that the official report did not account for the audio evidence, the arranged equipment, or her own testimony. Her complaint was dismissed. She has not worked as a commercial diver since the incident. She now lives in Kamloops, where she has become involved with a network of individuals who claim to have had similar experiences. She has shared her story publicly, despite warnings from former colleagues and government officials that she should remain silent. In a recorded interview from 2022, she said, "I know what I saw down there. I know what I heard. There is something in the water off the coast of British Columbia. Something that has been there for a very long time. It's not hostile, exactly. It's not evil. It's just so different from us, so alien to human experience, that contact with it breaks something in your mind. It shows you things you can't process. It speaks to you in a language that your brain isn't designed to understand. And once it knows you're there, once it's seen you, it never stops calling. I hear it every night. When I close my eyes, I see the light in the deep. I see Silas and Evangeline descending into it, and part of me wishes I had followed them. The incidents I have described span over 30 years. They involve different people, different locations, different circumstances. But they share common elements that suggest a single underlying phenomenon. The sound, a low-frequency hum or vibration that is perceived not through the ears, but through the body itself. A sound that carries information, images, compulsions, the shape, a geometric anomaly that does not conform to natural structures, something constructed, designed, placed, the call, an overwhelming desire to enter the water, to descend, to approach, a compulsion that overrides rational thought and self-preservation instinct. The change. Survivors report alterations, physical changes like the shift in Aldous Pennywhistle's eye color, psychological changes like the persistent visions reported by Rosalind Dewberry, the sense that contact with the phenomenon has fundamentally altered their relationship with reality. What is the sounding deep? I cannot answer that question with certainty. The evidence suggests something that defies conventional explanation, an intelligence or presence that exists in the deep waters off British Columbia's coast, something that has been there for centuries, perhaps longer, something that is aware of humanity and is attempting, in its alien way, to make contact. Some researchers have speculated that it is extraterrestrial, an artifact or entity that arrived on Earth in the distant past and has remained hidden beneath the ocean ever since. Others believe it is terrestrial but unknown, a form of life that evolved in the crushing darkness of the deep ocean, developing in ways that we cannot imagine. Still others believe it is not alive at all, not in any sense we understand, that it is something more fundamental, a feature of reality itself, a doorway, a threshold between what we know and what lies beyond. I do not know which explanation is correct. I do not know if any human explanation can adequately describe what witnesses have encountered. What I do know is that people continue to disappear along the British Columbia coast. Boats still vanish without trace. Swimmers still walk into the water and never return. And those who survive their encounters carry the experience with them forever, unable to escape the memory of what they saw, what they heard, what called to them from the deep. In 2021, I obtained access to a database maintained by the Canadian Coast Guard that tracks maritime incidents along the British Columbia coast. The database is not public, but it was shared with me by a source who wishes to remain anonymous. The data reveals a pattern that has never been officially acknowledged. Between 1980 and 2020, there were 247 maritime incidents in British Columbia that remained officially unexplained. Vessels that disappeared without trace. Bodies that were never recovered. Survivors who reported experiences that investigators could not account for. When these incidents are plotted geographically, they cluster around specific locations. The waters near Desolation Sound, where the Stellan's promise was lost. The area northwest of Vancouver Island, where the Temperance detected its anomaly. Mortimer's Passage, where Silas Crowfoot and Evangeline Stonecroft disappeared. These clusters align with underwater features, deep trenches, fissures in the continental shelf, places where the seafloor drops away into abyssal depths that have never been fully explored. The pattern suggests that whatever is down there is not confined to a single location. It is spread across the underwater terrain of British Columbia's coast, concentrated in places where the deep ocean approaches the shore, where the darkness below comes closest to the world above. I spoke with a geologist named Cordelia Ashburton, who has studied the seafloor of this region for over 2 decades. She was reluctant to discuss the topic of anomalous incidents, but she did share some observations that she said she had never put in an official report. She said that certain areas of the British Columbia seafloor do not behave the way they should. Sonar mapping produces inconsistent results. Depths that should be stable fluctuate without explanation. There are regions where underwater instruments malfunction with unusual frequency, where remotely operated vehicles lose signal without clear cause, where the ocean seems to actively resist observation. She said she had heard rumors from colleagues about what had been found in some of these areas. Structures that should not exist, sounds that should not be possible. Phenomena that challenged everything we think we know about the ocean and what lives within it. When I asked her if she believed something unknown was present in these waters, she paused for a long time before answering. Then she said, "I believe the ocean keeps secrets. I believe there are things in the deep that we have never seen, never catalogued, never imagined. Whether those things are natural or something else, I can't say. But I know this. The people who have looked too closely at some of these anomalies have not been the same afterward. They see something down there that changes them, and some of them don't come back at all. I want to tell you now about a man named Percival Underwood. His story is not well known because he made deliberate efforts to avoid attention. But before his death in 2017, he shared his account with a small group of researchers, and I have obtained permission from his estate to include it here. Percival was a marine archaeologist who worked for a private research firm based in Victoria. In 2004, his firm was contracted by an unnamed client to investigate a site approximately 80 kilometers off the coast of Haida, Gwaii. The client believed that a shipwreck from the late 19th century might be located at this site and wanted a preliminary survey conducted. Percival led a team of 3 researchers to the location. They used sonar and remote cameras to survey the seafloor at a depth of approximately 400 meters. They did not find a shipwreck. They found something else. The sonar data revealed a structure on the seafloor that Percival described in his notes as architectural. It was not a natural formation. The angles were too precise, the proportions too deliberate. It appeared to be a complex of interconnected chambers or rooms, partially buried in sediment, extending over an area of approximately 2 square kilometers. Percival ordered a more detailed survey. Remote cameras were lowered to capture visual data. The footage from these cameras has never been released publicly, but Percival described what it showed in detailed notes that he kept until his death. The structure was composed of a material he could not identify. It was dark, almost black, but it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The surfaces were smooth, free of the marine growth that should have accumulated over the centuries or millennia that the structure must have been submerged. The chambers appeared to be empty, but the cameras could not penetrate far into the interior. The darkness inside was absolute, impervious to the powerful lights on the remote units. It was as if the structure contained a darkness denser than the water around it, a void that light could not enter. At several points during the survey, the cameras recorded what Percival described as movement. Not definite shapes or creatures, but disturbances in the water. Currents that should not exist at that depth. Shadows that seemed to shift and flow at the edges of the camera's field of view. Then, on the 3rd day of the survey, the team recorded something that ended the expedition. One of the cameras was positioned at the entrance to what appeared to be a larger chamber, perhaps a central hall or gathering space. The lights illuminated the threshold of the entrance, but the interior remained dark. The team was recording footage of the entrance when something emerged from the darkness. Percival's notes describe it this way. At first I thought it was a tentacle or appendage of some kind, something organic. But as it extended into the light, I realized it was nothing like that. It was geometric, crystalline, a protrusion of angles and facets that caught the light and refracted it in colors I have never seen. It extended slowly, deliberately, as if reaching for the camera, as if it knew we were watching. The team watched as the protrusion extended further into the light. Then it stopped, and then it began to vibrate. The vibration produced a sound that was transmitted through the water and recorded by the camera's microphone. Percival said it was the most disturbing thing he had ever heard. Not loud, but penetrating. A frequency that seemed to bypass his ears and enter directly into his brain. He felt it in his skull, in his spine, in his chest. He said it felt like something was trying to communicate with him, trying to insert thoughts into his mind that were not his own. The team immediately retrieved the cameras and ended the expedition. They returned to Victoria and submitted their findings to the client. Within days, representatives from the Canadian government contacted Percival's firm. The research data was confiscated. The team was required to sign non-disclosure agreements. The site coordinates were classified. Percival never discovered who his firm's client actually was, or why they had known to look in that specific location. He suspected that others had found the structure before him, that the survey was not a search, but a confirmation. In the years after the expedition, Percival experienced symptoms similar to those reported by other survivors of encounters with the sounding deep. Insomnia, vivid nightmares, a persistent sense that he was being watched or monitored. He said he could sometimes hear the sound, that vibration from the structure, at the edges of sleep. He said it was calling to him, inviting him to return, to descend, to enter the chambers that the cameras had not been able to penetrate. He never returned to the site. He never conducted another deep-water expedition. He retired from marine archaeology in 2009 and spent his remaining years compiling his notes, trying to understand what he had encountered, trying to fit it into some framework that made sense. He died in 2017 of a stroke. His notes passed to his daughter, Temperance Underwood, who has made portions of them available to researchers. She said her father never stopped talking about what he had seen. In his final years, he became convinced that the structure off Haida Gwaii was just one of many, that there was a network of similar structures scattered across the world's oceans, all connected, all part of something vast and incomprehensible. He believed that whoever or whatever had built those structures was still there, waiting, listening, calling. What are we to make of these accounts? How do we reconcile them with our understanding of the world? I have spoken with skeptics who dismiss these stories as misperception, hallucination, and folklore. They point out that the ocean is a hostile environment that places extreme stress on the human body and mind. They note that deep water diving can cause nitrogen narcosis, oxygen toxicity, and other conditions that impair judgment and perception. They suggest that the survivors of these incidents are simply traumatized people struggling to make sense of accidents and losses that have natural, mundane explanations. I have also spoken with believers who accept these accounts at face value. They point to the consistency of the reports across different witnesses, different decades, different locations. They note that the descriptions of the sound, the shape, the call, are remarkably similar despite the witnesses having no contact with each other. They argue that this consistency suggests an underlying reality, a genuine phenomenon that multiple people have independently encountered. I do not know which group is correct. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between. Perhaps the ocean does harbor something unknown, something that witnesses have perceived imperfectly through the limitations of human senses and human understanding. Perhaps what they have encountered is real, but our descriptions of it are inadequate, filtered through minds that evolved in air and sunlight and were never designed to comprehend what lives in the crushing darkness of the deep. What I do know is that the stories continue. The disappearances continue. The calls to the Coast Guard, The boats that never return. The survivors who emerge from the water changed. Just last year, in 2025, a kayaker named Mortimer Calloway disappeared while paddling near Tofino on the west coast of Vancouver Island. His kayak was found floating empty a kilometer offshore. His body was never recovered. His girlfriend, Clementine Harrogate, told investigators that in the days before his disappearance, Mortimer had been acting strangely. He had trouble sleeping. He said he kept hearing something, a sound like humming or singing that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. He said he felt drawn to the water in a way he could not explain. On the morning of his disappearance, he told Clementine he was going for a short paddle, just an hour or two. He said he needed to be near the ocean. He said he needed to listen. She never saw him again. The RCMP investigated his disappearance and concluded that he had likely been swept out to sea by currents and drowned. The case was closed within weeks, but Clementine does not accept this conclusion. She has joined the network of survivors and family members that has grown around these incidents, people who share their experiences and compare their accounts, people who believe that something in the water is responsible for their losses. She said Mortimer was an experienced kayaker who knew the waters around Tofino well. She said he would never have allowed himself to be swept away by currents he understood. She said something took him. Something called to him, and he answered. She said she can hear it sometimes, too. When she walks along the shore at night, when the waves break against the rocks and the fog rolls in from the ocean, she can hear it beneath the sound of the surf. A low hum, a vibration, a voice that speaks in frequencies that the conscious mind cannot process. She said it terrifies her. But she also said it draws her. It makes her want to enter the water, to swim out into the darkness, to find what Mortimer found, to understand what he understood. She said she has to fight the impulse every day. She said she does not know how much longer she can resist. This is the nature of the sounding deep. It does not attack. It does not pursue. It simply calls. It calls to something within us, some part of the human psyche that responds to the darkness and the depth. It speaks to the ancient parts of our brain that remember when we came from the water, when the ocean was home. And some of us answer. I want to conclude this account with a document that has never been published before. It is a letter written by Prosper Wainwright, the captain of the Stellan's Promise, in the weeks before his final voyage. The letter was found among his personal effects after his disappearance and was preserved by his wife, Ottilie, who held on to it for over 30 years before sharing it with researchers. The letter is addressed to no one. It appears to be a record of his thoughts, an attempt to understand what was happening to him. It reads as follows. I do not know how to explain what I have been experiencing. I am not a man given to fancy or imagination. I have worked the ocean for 30 years, and I have always understood it as a practical thing. Water, currents, weather, fish, the mechanical reality of making a living from the sea. But something has changed. Something is reaching out to me from below. It started 3 weeks ago. I woke in the night hearing a sound. Not a sound from outside, not a noise in the house. A sound inside my head. A humming, like a great engine running somewhere in the distance. I went to the window and looked out at the water, and I swear I could see something out there. A light. Not on the surface, below the surface. A glow in the deep that pulsed in time with the sound. Since then, I cannot sleep properly. The sound is always there, at the edge of hearing. And when I do sleep, I dream. I dream of descending. I dream of swimming down through black water, deeper and deeper, until I reach a place where the darkness gives way to light. But it is not a warm light. It is a cold light, a light that does not illuminate but reveals. In this light, I see things that I cannot describe, structures that do not obey the laws of geometry, beings that do not obey the laws of life, things that have been waiting in the deep since before the continents formed. They know I am here. They have noticed me, and they want me to come to them. I do not know if I am losing my mind. I do not know if this is madness or revelation, but I know that I cannot resist it much longer. The call is growing stronger. Every day, the impulse to walk to the shore, to wade into the water, to swim out and down, grows more powerful. I am going out on the boat next week. Part of me hopes that being on the water will ease this compulsion, that I can satisfy whatever draws me to the ocean by working upon it, by being near it, without answering the call. But another part of me knows the truth. I am not going out to fish. I am going out to find it, to see it, to understand. Whatever happens, I want someone to know this. I am not afraid. I have lived my life on the water, and I will die on the water. If what I have been hearing and seeing is real, then I am about to learn something that few humans have ever learned. I will see what lies beneath. And if it is not real, if I am simply going mad, then at least the madness will end. Either way, I am at peace. Prosper. The letter ends there. 2 weeks after it was written, Prosper Wainwright walked off the deck of his boat and into the waters of the British Columbia coast. He was never seen again. What waits in the sounding deep? What has been calling to the people of this coast for generations? I cannot answer these questions. Perhaps no one can. Perhaps the answers exist only in the darkness below, available only to those who answer the call and descend to learn them for themselves. But I believe the phenomenon is real. Too many witnesses, too many disappearances, too many consistent accounts from people who had no connection to each other, who experienced something that defies explanation and carries it with them forever. Something is down there, in the trenches, in the fissures, in the places where the seafloor falls away into depths that no light has ever reached. It is ancient, it is vast, it is patient, and it is still calling. If you live near the British Columbia coast, you may have heard it already. A hum beneath the sound of the waves, a vibration in your chest when you stand at the water's edge, a pull toward the deep that you cannot explain. If you have, you are not alone. Thousands have felt it before you. Some have resisted, some have answered. Those who answer are never found. But perhaps they find something else. Perhaps in the darkness, in the cold, in the crushing pressure of the deep, they finally understand what has been calling to them all along. Perhaps they become part of it. Perhaps they are not lost. Perhaps they are home. The ocean is vast. The ocean is deep. And the ocean remembers everyone who enters it forever. This has been the story of The Sounding Deep, the most disturbing British Columbia horror story that has never been officially told. Until now,